All right.
Hey, so what do you pay attention to most in your life now?
I mean, probably, my home and my career. You know what I mean? I guess that's got a pretty wide berth there. But I think it's kind of a combination of making sure I'm still making really great art and that I'm inspired and that and that I'm tending to what's important back at home. Every time I get the chance.
What makes you want to make great art? Is it because you want to touch other people, or you want to relieve your soul of things that are going on inside your...
It's probably more the latter, but followed pretty closely by the former.
Yeah, right.
I think, for me, since I was really, really young, I mean, even as young as like 6, 7 years old, I had started writing poetry as a means of just talking through my day and whatever.
Right.
And so I always felt like this instinct to create as a reaction to daily living, and then when I
create as a reaction to daily living. Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
And then as I, I lost a family member when I was 9, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced death in any way, and it had this profound impact on me. And I started to play the piano and sort of sing, and that's where I think I found that early poetry was kind of like, oh, this is it was the kind of precursor to writing songs, and since then it's just been kind of a gut reaction. I think as you do it for a lot of years, sometimes you get into a rut where you think you have to do it because it's a part of your business or a part of your, or for the sole sake of connecting, or and so those are the times that get tricky. When the fact that I do this professionally actually can cloud the intention behind why it gets done in the first place.
Right.
But I think in those moments, especially, I kind of try and make a point to reconnect to why it is that I even started doing it and why it is that I enjoy it.
Do you think back and go, wow, I was 9 years old and profoundly affected by death?
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm just going to say most 9-year-olds aren't moved by it. They're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, what's on TV?
I was very conscious of what it was when it happened. I really cared a lot for him. It was my mother's brother, and I really, he was kind of this figurehead. Like he was the producer of the Jane Fonda workout, and he was one of these big kind of. He was kind of one of these big entertainment industry types, and he was so much fun going over to their house. They had the big screens and the swimming pool, but ultimately he was just this really funny, sweet, amazing dude. And so when he wasn't, when all of a sudden, like, and I didn't really spend that much time with him as a kid. It was just like we'd go out to California and be like, oh, we get to see Uncle Stu. But I remember when it registered, when it registered that he was gone. It just I think I cried for like a week straight.
Is that because you guys were you a religious family? Were you brought up like in a church that said, okay, there's an end to life and you need to, I guess, make peace with your maker or something? I mean, was there something like that, or was it just you're never going to see the guy again?
I was definitely raised in a religious family in a sense. My mother was a Catholic. My dad was, I guess at that point, probably agnostic. But I think it was just more that I missed him. Like I just knew that this was a person who for the limited time that we spent together, that I really enjoyed and admired, and one of those adults that it was like, wow, that's that's a cool guy. I want to be like that guy, And then so I think I just realized, and it affected my family really deeply too. So I think, we sort of, there was a lot of grief over it.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine commit suicide in high school, and I don't know, maybe it's just my protective element inside me that every time somebody has died close to me now, it's like they just sort of moved away.
Right.
And I think I'm going to see him again. And now that doesn't mean that I think there's an awesome heaven out there and all that stuff, although I kind of hope there is, of course.
Right.
But I still feel like I can talk to him or at least communicate, even though I don't know if that's the spirit world in me or the spirit world that's out there and amongst all of us.
Well, I'd say later in life, and granted I've been lucky not to have lost too many people too close to me in my later years here so far. But I think I have a little bit more of a realistic grasp on life and death, especially considering just, my brief brush with it, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you then think, wow, I might end up seeing my Uncle Stu?
Truthfully, no, not really. I have a much different perception of what the afterlife is. You know what I mean? At least for me. And again, I've got nothing but respect for how people perceive these things, because I think it's a subject that everybody has to arrive at their own conclusions on. But for me, I think, he really illustrated to me what I believe the afterlife is, which is like, here's a guy who passed away, and in his absence, as one person that was affected by him, I started creating music. It set me on a path and a trajectory for my entire life, and now 20 years later, this is what I do for a living, playing shows for people and having people come up to me after gigs and tell them how the music we play affects them. And I think in that sense, it's like there's a very tangible line of connection and living on through other people right there that I can already connect with. And so I sort of have always felt like maybe that's how we live on, is through the ways, good, both good and bad, in which we touch people.
So do you think differently spiritually now, prior to being diagnosed with leukemia and pulling through it? And did that make you sort of search what life is all about spiritually, and come at a different conclusion because of it?
I think I at the point, if it maybe solidified some of my opinions about it. I think truthfully, I had, a lot of what occurred, when I got sick, I had, leading up to that point, had been searching a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of that record that the Everything in Transit, the first Jax record, in some ways was attached to that search,
Yes, fully about searching, I think.
Yeah, and so in a weird way, when I found out that I was sick, kind of towards the tail end of that journey, I think I had already sort of arrived at some of these conclusions. And granted, these things are malleable and they change with time.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it sort of made clear to me, like, okay, this is why it's worth fighting to live, and but I didn't have any major epiphanies as far as like
Jesus is sitting next to me and he's lifted me from the sickness of right.
That didn't happen.
Yeah. What do you think pulled you through mostly? Was it medicine, doctors, family, friends, love, God, sister?
All of the above, really.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was a very peaceful time in my life, surprisingly. I think people are always shocked to hear that, but I think when you come close to something like that, you realize that there's only one thing to do, which is to survive. And so all of a sudden, all these other things, the elements of will my record do well, and what's the next song, and you know what I mean? All that stuff just sort of
superficial stuff.
All that stuff just falls away so quickly,
That's sort of a good thing, isn't it?
It was beautiful. I think that my biggest struggle with cancer was when I got better, and when a lot of that peace disappeared, and then sort of set me back on the road to find it again.
Oh, wow.
And which is it's I struggle to explain that to people, because I think a lot of people are shocked when they hear it. But yeah, I think in that sense, it's like I was very open to the world around me, and there was a lot of love coming my way, and there were a lot of people pulling for me, and I had doctors who cared and wanted to get me better, and I had this transplant for my sister, and my parents stepped up in a way that I just was like so moved, and my girlfriend, but future wife at the time, everybody just rallied, and I think in that sense, it was a group effort.
I also wondered if maybe making the documentary gave you purpose to, maybe extra purpose. You know what I mean? It's like, I have a project here I need to finish on the good side of it.
Well, I think, strangely, though, the documentary was really not even a thought in the time that it was being filmed. It was really just a video journal.
Right.
I had filmed, the previous 9 months I had filmed, well, I guess, probably it was like November I got that camera. So, yeah, about 6 months leading up to being sick, I was filming every day of my life all day long.
Right.
Right.
It became your own personal long form Twitter. Twitter feed.
Yeah, it was my. But it was. I wasn't really giving out the footage per se. It was just this thing, and it was like I knew for whatever reason I was going through this really serious transition, and I wanted to have it locked, even if it was on a bunch of tapes in a drawer, which ultimately it was. At least I knew it was there, and I had documented it.
Yeah.
So when I got sick, it was like I'll just keep filming, and I stopped at one point when it was like, okay, this is starting to look like a snuff film or something, but well, not precisely, I guess, but
right.
But yeah, I mean, that's the documentary. Ultimately, I think was the beginning to putting it behind me, I guess, if nothing else.
Do you think you had to get sick to kind of get your priorities straight?
I do. I think
It's kind of a weird thing to say, isn't it? But
no,
yeah.
I do, and I don't think I did for a while.
Yeah.
I think I regressed almost immediately after being well enough to party and drink and have fun again. I really sort of.
So you were the heart attack victim right back into burgers.
Pretty much.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's it's something I it was taking a little while to admit to. You know what I mean? Because I think it was always lined with this knowledge that I wasn't necessarily going in the right direction. But yeah, I sort of reverted almost immediately. I mean, I said it with pride at the time, but I took my last cyclosporin anti-rejection medication with a shot of Jägermeister.
Wow.
And I think those next few years became pretty tricky.
Well, was it sort of a big FU to cancer and go, you know what, I'm gonna live exactly the way I want to live?
I think what it was this. I really resented the fact that eventually that upon my sort of right at the end of my road, it's like I had felt such a sense of purpose when I was making everything in transit. I had felt such a sense of like, I know what I'm doing. I'm out here alone, kind of figuring this out, but I'm making my way back, to my girl who I was separated from at the time, and I had really found the heart of my music again, which I had started to drift from in the later years of something corporate, and I was doing that while I was kind of on this like bender, but it was like I was 22, and it's like, I mean, it wasn't so dangerous per se, I don't want to paint like a picture of like,
like
waking,
you were strung out all the time.
No, but I was partying a lot because it was fun, and I was a kid, and I was making money, and I was I was spending money, and I was having fun, and so even though I felt like when I ended up in that hospital bed, like it all sort of made sense, I think my reaction when I was well enough to kind of put both feet back on the ground was like I hadn't finished that yet or something, and it took me it really until the last year or two to realize like it's because I wasn't the way I was going to finish that was going to be in a hospital room for another reason, probably.
Right.
And I think I figured that out. It took me like I said the few years of recovery and doing the glass passenger and all that before I sort of last summer kind of smacked myself around a little bit and woke up and I was like, okay, dude, you're going to be 30 soon and You've got a lot of good things going on. Like there's, you don't need to black out every night to, make a point of that, I guess.
I thought a really cool song off of Everything in Transit was Holiday from Rio.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if you were writing that from trying to let go of sort of that you knew you were living in the superficiality. Yeah. Right? And trying to let go of all the busyness that sort of stuck you in that area. I just thought it was interesting.
I mean, Holiday was really this, it was sort of the, it was the impetus to that record. It was the thing where I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to assume this new identity. Right. Not out of not a false identity, but like almost like there was this thing that had been repressed in me somehow.
Interesting.
And all of a sudden I was waking up to it or something. And it's certainly an escapist kind of love song, in a lot of senses. But I think it also foreshadowed the reality that it was a holiday. Yeah. And it couldn't go on forever.
Well, and I think maybe that's why you wrote I'm Ready too, right? Because
probably.
Right, I mean, it almost dovetails right into it for me, you know what I mean? You're in that confusing sort of life that's going on, you got to turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, all those songs were like sort of the precursor to what happened. You know, like I recorded I'm Ready, and I recorded A Holiday from Real and Bruised sort of before I had made or at least written them, before I had kind of decided to disconnect from everything.
Okay.
You know, and that was, you know, I'm Ready was, you know, my life has become a boring pop song and everyone's singing along. You know, it's like...
so you're really searching for meaning, full tilt. I mean, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, that was that record. I mean, that whole thing was just, you know, I mean, I think that's what all these records have been about. I think that one, you know, managed, I think, in a lot of senses to strike a really great balance between sort of the difficulty of that, but musically, it was sort of this manic kind of happy sounding thing, you know, which I think made all of that struggle seem fun, and at that moment it was kind
manically happy. I like that idea, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, it was definitely the thing at that point.
Right. Why do you think so many people connect with the mixtape?
You know, I think because it was really focused and it was really true. You know, I was able to. I think at that point, I had been separated from my girlfriend at the time, and I think there's a lot of color and texture and visual attached back to something, sort of an emotion that's a little more abstract. You know, it's like, you know, this feeling of like loss, and I want to be with you, but there's something that keeps us apart, but it didn't stop me from going by your house that day, or it didn't stop you from breaking into mine to get something. You know what I mean? Like I think, you know, like a lot of the songs on that record, there was a really strong visual attached to the emotion behind it, and I think it made it easy for people to just sort of, one, put themselves in my shoes, but two, you know, feel what it's like to be in those shoes. You know, because I'm sure, you know, these are things that you know, if you're 13, you've probably experienced. You know.
Do you think you have a different definition of love now?
I think I have a little bit more of a understanding of it, maybe. You know, I think I've started to learn the differences between this idea of falling in love and the idea of being in love. And I think that's a point that truthfully really is kind of the centerpiece of what People and Things is about. It's sort of that, you know, whether it says it exactly, I think that's kind of what the search on this record was about, you know, and it did help me to define love in my life, for sure.
I love the idea in My Racing Thoughts off of People and Things, because I think we're all kind of messed up. It's kind of where you go, but we need that partner in life that can lean on when we need to, or to shake us around when we need to be shaken. Yeah,
and I think in which case, like, Racing Thoughts is definitely about just that. I think so much of my life in the past 6 years has been confused. You know what I mean? I in a word, and not in a bad way. It's been awesome. I mean, you know, it's like I've lived a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. You know what I mean? And I've learned a lot.
The awesome confusion.
Yeah, you know.
Wow.
But I think that there's also there was an element to this record that it was like, I don't want to go. I mean, I'm happy to go through my life questioning things, but I don't want to go through my life confused about things. And I think there was so much caught up for me in this idea of how do you write about this more refined, but in a sense rawer version of love, you know, one that you know, that really allows you to sort of explore if you choose to, you know. And I think with a song like Racing Thoughts and songs like Television, and I kind of decided, well, you know what, everybody talks about love from this place of like, you know, I'm falling in love or I'm falling out of love, you know, but it seems like there's a lot fewer songs that talk about the work, you know what I mean, and that talk about, and that talk about, you know, what it's like to really fight for love,
right?
You know, and And I think, you know, at the heart of this record was that fight, this idea that like, okay, now I'm here and I'm in it, you know, and it's like, and I've struggled because I talked to my wife about this, you know, and it's like, should I talk about this stuff? Like, I don't know how to talk about this record, and you know, because it's kind of exposing in a lot of senses. But her and I, you know, we. In our first few years of marriage, I think we struggled to figure out the balance between what I do, between my recovery, you know, and it was a very kind of selfish time where I was really caught up in a lot of like my stuff, you know, and I think I missed the point for a while there that she was there to help me,
to share life with, right?
You know?
To share life with,
and it made our first few years pretty rough, you know, and I mean, there was always happiness in there, but it was always kind of like, you know, not to say teetering on the brink of falling apart, but just teetering on the brink of a fight or or you know, or an argument or some sort of misplaced anxiety from my part. And I think I really wanted to be honest about that in this record, because I got the feeling as I started to talk to my friends who, you know, were in similar situations, like that this is a transition that a lot of people struggle to strike the balance, you know?